What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. This is the last installment episode of the Harbor Freight tire changer, the bubble balancer, and all things tire related that I'm going to have on the channel for a while. Well, hopefully for a while, because that will mean that I didn't have to either change a TPMS sensor out, or repair a tire, or change a tire. So yeah, this hopefully goes into storage for a good long while. But before I do that, before I get this out of the middle of my garage and reclaim the space, I want to do two things. First, I want to break down the cost of everything that you see here that's pictured, including the other items that I ended up needing to do a DIY tire change. Because I think that will help inform you as to whether or not it's the project you want to tackle. And I also want to go through my justifications for why I think the costs are worthwhile. Secondly, I want to talk about the setup of the manual tire changer from Harbor Freight, including getting the drop-in anchors into your concrete floor, and just my thoughts in general about the setup, as well as I'll highlight a few details along the way that I think you'll find helpful that I ran into. Some quality issues with the tool itself. So I'll cover all of that in the second part of the video, and I'll try and put timeline markers so that you can just jump right to that discussion if that's all that you're interested in. But for now, let's jump over to a computer, into a spreadsheet, and crunch the numbers.
Welcome inside and to the analysis. So what I want to do here is put everything onto the table, and you and I can answer the question for ourselves whether or not it's worth the cost and how much we'll save too. This is a list of all of the items that I wound up needing for the tire change, but note a couple of things before we get started here. Number one, you might already have a lot of these items on hand, so your cost would be different, of course. You might also be able to find some of these items cheaper than what I did, so of course that would lower the cost as well. And thirdly, there are some items that I didn't put in here, and that's intentional. These are things like a hammer drill and an air compressor or a way to inflate the tires. There are too many options in those categories for me to throw a number at, because you could go used, you could go cordless, or have a battery operated drill, and you might already be in a battery ecosystem, so that could change the price. Again, just a lot of variables, and those are core shop items anyway. For the most part, you're going to arguably be able to use them for other projects. So it's just a good idea to already invest in those when the need comes up, in my opinion. And lastly too, the duckbill mod is not actually from Walmart, but from eBay. But most of this analysis I had already pre-recorded, so sorry about that. Okay, to get us started, the Autel sensor. You might not have this as a cost. I had to incur it because I hulked the tire over the sensor and ended up cracking the housing. You can see that in the second video where I talk about TPMS replacement, but I felt that it was good to show it here in case you do have to replace a sensor. You would see the cost. Do note though, if you do have to replace one, you would need a TPMS tool to reprogram it. So that would be additional cost that also isn't shown here. A centering cone. I don't know that you could do without this easily if you have a duckbill mod, because it helps keep the rim centered on the tire changer so that the duckbill mod doesn't actually get hung up as it's going around. And that would be a pretty big deal. Likewise, I wouldn't want to do the tire change without the duckbill mod. That was just so central for me. The idea of just using tire irons is not something I wanted to try. And I do think you risk scratching up your rim more than you would having the duckbill mod. A tire lube brush, you could actually go cheaper on this and just use like a paintbrush. It could even be a stiff paintbrush probably. But I had an order in with Walmart, and so I just went with this. A core removal tool, it's pretty cheap, but you will have to have one. Tire lube. So this is something where there was a suggestion in the first video to maybe use antifreeze. I've heard people say soapy water. I wanted something with anti-corrosive properties that I didn't have to worry about. And so I just went with, tire lube. This is probably a lifetime supply. I mean, it's in a tub, and for me, again, it's probably a lifetime supply, assuming that it doesn't break down over time, and that in 3 to 5 years when I need to do the next tire change, it'll still be good. And then 3 to 5 years after that. So maybe it was a mistake to buy this, but for my first time, I wanted as quality of an experience as I could get. And I figured tire lube was the proper way to achieve that. A 1/4 ounce and 1/2 ounce wheel weights. You probably won't need an entire set or box of these, but you need to have them because you'll need a couple out of them, right? So this will probably also last you a lifetime or a long time, but they're going to be needed. The wheel balancer, you can get this at Harbor Freight too. I don't know if there's a quality difference between the Amazon one that I picked up or Harbor Freight's. I've seen them on eBay. I mean, You can get these a lot of different places, but I do think this is completely necessary. Brass wire wheel attachments. I actually bought these a couple of years ago, then it came in a set. So you could probably pick up a wire wheel attachment for pretty cheap. I don't know about brass. I wanted to use brass because it's a softer metal. I just figured that that wouldn't scratch up the rim as much. So I wanted to go with that option. This is an estimate. I don't have the receipt total, but I think it was like $4 for a pack of Scotchbrite sponges. The tire changer itself, pretty essential here, right? The tire iron, I would say this is essential. Definitely wouldn't want to skip getting this. A masonry bit set to actually drill into the concrete, if that's what you're choosing to do. That's what I did. I didn't have a masonry bit set, so I needed to purchase one from Harbor Freight. It was pretty cheap, and it did a fine job, the cheap set. But this is an additional cost. Drop-in concrete anchors in the punch. After you drill into the concrete, you need to put the anchor in and then punch it down. And then bolts and washers for securing the tire changer to the floor. I put this as an estimate. I don't remember exactly how much it cost. You might need different lengths of bolts, so you might want to just buy a bunch of them and have them on hand, because you might need to hacksaw one of them down a little bit. You might need an in-between size of a bolt that they just don't carry. Okay, so our total was $419.21. There might be a few other things I'm forgetting, so this might not be a completely accurate total, but this did include tax. So my hope was that this will be a really accurate depiction of the cost analysis. The total cost for the tires that I bought, I got them from Tire Rack, was $609.49. And Tire Rack, from what I read on the invoice or the receipt that I had, is that Tire Rack is now affiliated with Discount Tire. So I think they're like one and the same company. And to do the analysis on savings, I went against Discount Tire. I figured that they'd be the cheapest option across the board. And I figured that they would be widely available in most areas. So I felt that that was a good baseline to use. A local shop that is not Discount Tire might charge more, might charge less, but probably more, because again, I figured the Discount Tire is about as cheap as you can get. I could be wrong. Comment below if you know of a cheaper place that it does good quality for people that see this, get the sticker shock, and don't want to do it. And I think that there is ample justification, as I'll explain here in a moment, to go ahead and bite the bullet, spend the $419.21 or thereabouts, and do all of this, especially if you're handy and you like it. Okay, so we know the total that we would have saved, and we know the total that we spent. And if you take the total that we spent and divide out the total that we saved, we have 3.33. Now that's with the sensor. If you don't need the sensor, it's 3.08. And again, you might have a lot of this stuff already in your garage, already in your inventory. And so this could go lower. What this represents is how many sets of 4 tires you're going to need to change in order to break even on the cost. So we're at just around 3. So that's 12 tires. Now, a bunch of justifications can be made to where while it's 3 today, it might not be 3 tomorrow or in 3 to 5 years when you need to do another change. And that's because of inflation. Inflation's just been out of control. Prices are going up everywhere. So your price on the labor and the tax and the disposal fee from Discount Tire today might not be the same. It will probably be more later. Even if robots come into the picture and can do these tire changes for us, you're still probably going to have to pay a fee for that machine to be maintained, their equipment, their building, on and on it goes, right? We all know how that works. And I will say too, one thing I neglected to mention, there is a disposal fee. Here's how this broke down. You'll need to check the regulations in your area in order to properly dispose of tires. For me, I say this a little bit tongue in cheek. On the first video, I noted, you can kiss the tire shop goodbye. Well, in my case, that's not really true, because in my area, pretty much the only option we have that I know of is to take the tires to a tire shop, pay the disposal fee, and then they recycle them for you. I actually lucked out. I took it to a tire shop local to me, all 4 of my old tires, and I was fully willing to pay the $5 per tire. So it's a little bit more than what Discount Tire was charging. I would probably in the future check with them first, unless the shop were to give me a break again. But in my case, the shop I went to, I had to wait in line for a while. And then there was a gentleman who I think used to work there. It was kind of a complicated mess. It was late in the day. They were ready to close up and get out of there. And this guy wanted the tires. He heard that I was there to trade these in or dispose of them. And he goes, oh, hey, are they, and he rattled off the numbers. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. I don't remember them off my top of my head. Let's go look at them. So we went back to the car, looked at them, and he was like, oh man, I can't take these. And that, had taken up a little bit of time. So he helped me get them to the building. And then when I went back in, he goes, oh, we, don't worry about it. We got you covered. Like, just go home. You don't have to pay anything. So that was really kind of them. But I did all of that on the up and up. I didn't just dump the tires, right? So definitely follow your regulations. There might be a fee associated with it. But yeah, getting back to inflation, your cost for these items here today is probably going to be less than what it will be in 2 to 3, 4, 5 years, whenever you need another tire change. And so it makes sense to me to go ahead and pony up the cash today and have all the equipment. And granted, I mean, there could be changes. There could be a new tire changer that's real slick and does better, but you could decide in the future whether or not to trade yours out. I still think it makes sense to assume what we have today in the manual tire changer, I think makes the most sense for a DIYer. Additionally, on that point, just to add another little line item here, electric vehicles, from what I read, because eventually, internal combustion engines will probably go the way of the dinosaur. Electric vehicles actually need to change tires more often. So while I say 3 to 5 years, if I'm driving in a couple of years, a decade or so, an EV, I might have to be changing tires every 2 years, every year and a half. Who knows? Hopefully tires will improve and they reinvent the wheel, literally speaking here, and the technology is better, and that won't be necessary in however long it takes for me to need and purchase an electric vehicle. But I digress. TPMS sensor repair. Years ago, this is probably a decade or more, I had a TPMS sensor replaced, and it was, I think, $89. And the sensor, as you can see up here, is just $32 from Autel. And again, you do have the cost of the tool and all of that to program it and whatnot. But still, I mean, this is another thing you can do at home and save money. Tire repair is another thing. If you get a hole in the tire, not in the sidewall, but a hole somewhere that is serviceable, you can do that at home. You can take care of it. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to pay whatever the cost is. And I know it's not much. And maybe if you bought tires from Discount Tire, then you'd have a warranty or something. As it happens, right? It always happens right after you're outside of a warranty that something malfunctions or breaks, or you get a nail through your tire, and then you're paying for the patch anyway. So the patches aren't that expensive. You might have to have a few other items on hand. Point being is you can do that at home too. And then lastly, we have quality. And I'll add to that too, your own satisfaction for having accomplished something and learned something. I've learned a lot throughout this process through the comments that you guys have made on the first video. And I, again, welcome comments here. But I like learning. It's fun. I like doing. It's fun. And I like accomplishing something. Also fun. So that's something I don't even have listed here, but I just wanted to mention. But on top of that, the quality. You control the quality. You know what you did. Hopefully, God forbid, you don't break a sensor like I did. But you know the quality, and you know what you want to put in to get the product that you want to get out of the work that you do. So you control all of that. And especially true if you have really nice rims, or like a Mustang or something that you sit in the garage and you only drive on Sundays. In those cases, you probably want to be the one handling that car. So therefore, it makes sense. We've geeked out enough here. Again, I welcome your comments. What'd you think? Please share it down below. And I'll remind you again, like the video if you like the content so far, and we'll keep rolling. I'll meet you out in the garage.
All right, well, I hope that was as riveting for you as it was for me. Now we're going to talk about the install. So, a couple of things. Now that I'm done with my tire changes, I can actually move this unit out of the way. And it's really simple. I just need to unbolt the 4 bolts that are screwed into the drop-in anchors. But I will cover the drop-in anchors really briefly here. So first and foremost, this is what they look like here. And I got these off of Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. You also need a punch that goes with this. And the idea is that you drill a hole into the concrete floor, 1/2 inch, and once that's drilled deep enough, you set this in and then you just hammer it down. And this actually embeds it into the concrete. I guess it splits out the bottom here to lock it in. And then these are just, in your concrete floor. And that way, when you're not using the unit, so like this is pretty much in the middle of my garage. And I don't always want it there because I need to park vehicles here and all of that kind of thing. But with the drop-in anchors, you still have the benefit of bolting it to the concrete floor when you need it and then moving it out of the way when you don't. And you just get bolts from, say, Home Depot. I also got some washers. You'll probably need to get a couple different sizes and just check to see which size you need depending on how deep you're going into the concrete floor and just for a myriad of other factors that you might run into that I didn't with your setup. But if you get a couple of different sizes, then you can just cut off whatever you don't need if you get bolts too long and just get a perfectly sized bolt to go into the drop anchors. All right, so another thing I had to deal with. The base of the tire changer was just really uneven on like 3 different units. I returned 2 because I thought it was like a manufacturing defect. But after I screwed in the bolts, as you can see, there's one hiding behind the bead breaker there, and then there's one like on that side with that wing. But yeah, what was off was that, and I don't remember which one it was that was the most off, but these like wings that come out off the sides, after you screw that in, they were kind of angled up a little bit. And it was off enough to be annoying because that would just mean that where you're setting in the drop-in anchors isn't like perfectly in line with where it should be. I don't know how to best describe that, but just imagine if it's angled up a little bit, then that bolt's also potentially going to come in at an angle. That's no good. So what I did is I just took a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and I set this assembled unit, not bolted into the ground, of course. I set it on that plywood in such a way that the part that didn't need to be adjusted was on the plywood. The part that did need to be adjusted was hanging off. And I took a dead blow hammer, like what you can see here, and I just pounded it down until it was level, essentially, with the floor. Perfectly perpendicular, to the stand itself. And that worked great. I had a helper that helped hold the stand while I did that, because as you can imagine, the stand was not wanting to stay flat. I guess maybe you could screw the stand into the plywood and somehow finagle it to where it's not rocking around, but really, it's just best if you can have a helper or some way to vise it down or grip it down where it's not going to move while you're trying to hammer it, because that would kind of defeat the purpose, right? But once that was done, everything else was pretty well made quality-wise. I think I mentioned this, but one of the variations of the tire changer that I bought had a pin that was like welded onto the base right there that stuck through that hole that you can see there, and that held the wheel so that it didn't move. That pin just stuck through one of the lug nut holes. But the version that I have just has the pin, as can be seen here. And I highlighted this in the other video, but you can see how mangled it is. This was stuck down into the lug nut hole and down into that hole. And then that just made it so that the rim couldn't rotate while you're using the duckbill mod or the tire irons to get the tire off. But it did cut into the wheel a bit. I don't think it damaged anything. It just mangled this, which, I don't really care. And it also mangled the key ring that, stops it from falling all the way through. So just like an FYI, this is going to get mangled. A mod that I might do at some point is drilling holes into the base plate there for the lug nuts. And then, putting like a stud in when I need to, and then screwing on one of the lug nuts. I've seen other people on YouTube do that. I wanted to try this out to see how it worked, and I'm glad I did. It worked fine. So just know you don't have to modify yours if you don't want to. Again, this works. But I guess it would make it so that it doesn't damage the inner part of those lug nut holes. Assuming that this could scratch against that aluminum alloy or something like that. So yeah, that covers some of the quirks with the manual tire changer. The other thing I'll say, there are really good videos out on drilling the holes that you'll need for these drop-in anchors, but they don't really cover one thing that I found to be kind of problematic. And that was, in my experience, I was using this little 12-volt Milwaukee Fuel hammer drill. And it worked great, don't get me wrong. I really love this little unit. But it did take a while to drill that hole. And as you can imagine, I'm holding it, and I'm trying to keep it at 90 degrees, perfectly in line with the concrete floor. And because this needed quite a bit of time to cut through all of that concrete, it was wobbling a bit. There's a tool or an attachment that you can buy, I believe, and I'll put it on the screen if I can find it, that would actually help you by sitting flush to the floor and, locking into the drill, I think maybe through the drill bit itself. And in that way, it would basically lock itself at a 90-degree angle so that you can't move this around. I mean, as long as your floor is flat, it'll stay perfectly flat against the floor to keep yourself in a 90-degree orientation. Now, where that matters, this hole right here that I cut for this anchor went like an extra, gosh, ½ inch deep. It was crazy. And it was because it was my first hole I've ever made, first time using the hammer drill, and I wanted it perfectly flush with the ground because I have little kids that run through here, and I didn't want any part of that drop-in anchor sticking up. And when I put the anchor in, once I, like I taped off the drill bit and everything, so that once I hit that part, I would know, oh yeah, okay, no more drilling, don't drill any further. Well, when I put the anchor in and kind of tapped it down with the mallet, it kind of wanted to lock in, and it actually took a lot of force to get back out. But I tried to get it out because it wasn't flush with the floor. Now, in hindsight, what I should have done, and you do want to vacuum out the holes after you drill them, because you'll have like concrete dust or whatever inside the holes. You need to vacuum that out so that the drop-in anchors take up that space. But what I should have done is just use that punch tool, because in my experience with the other ones, I mean, there was not much that it was proud above the floor. It was just maybe a centimeter or something like that. That punch actually punched down in the other cases, most on like 2 of them, down further. The other one stands a tiny bit proud of the floor, I think, but if it's anything at all, it's not by much, and it's not going to be a tripping hazard. But I was just really paranoid about that, and so all I'm trying to communicate is that having a tool that helps you center your drill at 90 degrees to the floor will make it so much easier for you, especially if you're using a 12-volt model like this, or just maybe like an underpowered hammer drill that isn't as good as what the pros use, or what someone would use all day, every day if they had to. And in using that kind of a tool too, hopefully it would help you to know you don't have to go any further. You're done, you've hit your mark, and again, it's right at 90 degrees, so there's no wishy-washiness with anything in terms of getting this stand to bolt where it needs to bolt. Other than that, I mean, really, once I had the feet straight and not crooked, not bowed up, I basically just set the whole unit down and I marked through the holes with a Sharpie, where the holes needed to be drilled. I drilled them one at a time, got the anchors in there, and then screwed it in to make sure that my marks were still true, because they did change a little bit. But again, I think that was because my drill was wobbling a bit, and some of them are at kind of an off angle, just by a little bit, but it's enough to matter, right? And so you don't want to get them all in there and then find that your unit doesn't screw in right or line up. So yeah, I welcome comments on any of the things that I've just mentioned. Please help educate the community, just sharing the problems I ran into. And I know some of you out there are experts with this, and I mean that sincerely. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. And so if you know a better way, or if you know gotchas around this process that I'm not thinking of or mentioning, please do share. I welcome it. I love being educated, and I love sharing that with the community. So that's about all I want to say about this unit, the tire changer itself. I talked about the bubble balancer in depth before and how I didn't modify mine, but some people said that they did. I think they drilled out the hole that this little pin right here sits into on that balancer. But as I explained in the last video, I wanted to try it out unmodified and just see what my results are. As far as the duckbill mod goes, I mentioned in my first video that there's a gentleman that has a company or a product with the branding Lucid Auto Works, and his looked a little bit heavier duty and beefier. But I will say, after some thought and after using this, I think all of my woes with this unit were just user error. I think this is a really well-crafted modification. I think the metal is great. I don't see any issues. I'm not a professional, but it looks to me like the welding is well done. And while it did get beat up, I mean, that's kind of to be expected. This is a unit that you're just going to see a lot of wear and tear on, because tire changing just, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like an activity that is just inherently abrasive, to the tools that you're using and everything else. But yeah, I do recommend this duckbill mod. I think for the money, and considering how infrequently I'm going to end up changing tires, this is perfectly suited for my needs. That's all I wanted to cover with the setup and the installation. If you have anything else that I missed, please feel free to comment. Please do consider liking the video and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your tire changes. Future content sneak peek, whole home power generation. Stay tuned.